So I've noticed in my time a real need to bring together experts and audiences from different sectors of different countries. A lot of conferences that I attend are very segmented, meaning you have an insurance conference, you have an investor conference, you have a government conference, you have whatever it is, right? And they are in their own little hubs. But often, what's missing is cross-industry collaboration for very systemic issues which impact everyone. So the point of our conference, the Global Power Index Conference, or Summit rather, Global Power Index Summit that we host every year, is to bring together a global audience of leaders in the insurance world, in the legal profession, in the investment world, and also the government world. Anyone who has a stakehold in international affairs and who are worried or concerned or curious about the changing nature of world affairs, we bring them to this summit. And unlike other summits where there's no opinion of the host because they bring together sponsors and they bring together speakers, we have a very strong opinion which is based on our Global Power Index. This is an annual index that we create that ranks the world on countries' global power and influence. So we rank 194 countries and we host this summit to showcase our index. A lot of times we have the media there to cover it. So we have a mixture of different people. Now that's very important because a lot of the time when speaking about geopolitical risk, and I'm sure you can see this in your own world, Antonio, it's only when something big happens, like an invasion, where people pay attention. But regionally, there are geopolitical risks happening every single day in different countries. But when things like an invasion of a European country happen, then everyone pays attention because of the systemic importance of the two players involved. So this conference, or this summit rather, is a chance to bring together global leaders, CEOs, chief investment officers, chief economists, heads of policy, heads of research of different institutions, so we can have a dialogue amongst each other about the issues that impact the whole room. And that's something that I don't see happening every single day. So our insights are used by these players so they can have much more, they can plan for much longer term strategy. Because when something like an invasion happens, once again, people think very short term, right? Instead of thinking maybe every quarter, they think almost every day to see where their investments are going. But what's lacking is long-term strategy planning for you to be able to forecast and to see with much more predictability where the world is going in the future and why the world is changing. That's something that I think is missing a lot in the investment world and also in other industries. So we plug that gap by providing our index, which provides quantitative and objective view on world affairs and on the trajectory of entire countries, so you can plan for the long term.
So now that we understood properly from the founder what is like the main outcome from your activity, that again, for me, it's absolutely, we are on the same page because it's absolutely insightful to have a specialist, especially if you are like us, recommending investments globally. So you mentioned about quite a few times about invasion. No? So we are that's one of the major today risks that we have here in Europe. No, that is what happened in Ukraine, the invasion from Russia. So straightforward to you from your chat, no, from your summit. Did you, your panelists, your investors, the relevant people, what was the main talkings? What are today the main risks to take into consideration? You mentioned also about a big number, if I catch it probably 149.
194 countries, 194
countries. So it's a huge basket of. So if you can give us what are the major geopolitical concerns that came up from this summit 2023.
Sure. So one of the main things I should mention is that we've produced a report, our Global Power Index report, which is available on our website, and I'm sure you'll make it available to your audience also, Antonio, which goes into depth regarding where the world ranks on the GPI, so you can see any country or region you care about and where they rank.
Well, if you allow me, yes, definitely, I will share with my clientele.
Yeah, I'll make sure to send that to you.
Thank you.
So there's two major themes, what we call macro trend catalysts, which emerge. And what a macro trend catalyst is essentially what causes the major themes in the world to develop. So what are the underlying tectonic phenomena that cause everything that you see in your world as an investor to happen? So there's two of them. The first one we call the Great Convergence. So what that means is that what we're noticing as countries grow and develop their power across time, what we see are four major themes that happen or occur in the world that will impact you no matter who you are. You could be an investor like yourself in London. You could be a dentist in Italy, right? You could be a farmer in Nicaragua. It doesn't matter who you are. At least one of the four of these global themes, what we call the global four, will impact you. And they include globalization, right? So the trends and issues of globalization will be a big factor on your world and on your work. The second major factor is geopolitical risk, right? As we can see now and across the world over time, we'll see more issues in relation to geopolitics occurring because countries will grow their power over time, which means they have a larger voice in international affairs, which means they will do more actively to secure their interests over time, right? The third thing that occurs is transformative technology becomes much more apparent in the world. So not only innovation coming from the West, but innovation coming from different parts of the world. And one of our speakers, Duarte Pedrera from Crown Agents Bank, spoke about the innovation happening in the African continent and the pros that has on the communities there. But that's happening all over the world. And the third thing is societal change. So things like migration shifts, the rise and growth of ethical investing or ESG becomes much more apparent across the world. But other kinds of investing themes will also emerge, right? And also the changes of attitudes of people across the world because there's different kinds of people coming into the societies. And the ramifications that has on the investment community will also become much more apparent. So the Great Convergence means all of these four things will converge and also happen together at the same time across different parts of the world. So linear risk, so focusing on one of these things at a time can no longer be the status quo. You must have a focus, you must have a team which sees how these four things interplay and interact with your portfolio so you are ahead of the curve throughout your investment career. So that's the first thing. The second thing that emerges in the world is what we call segmented polarity. This is a term which we define as a much more refined version of the concept of multipolarity, where there's a general consensus that because countries now are becoming more powerful, the centers of power of the world are becoming much more diverse. But this isn't happening homogeneously, meaning as countries develop specific advantages, for example, one country may develop more resources so they can use their resources to plan their agendas into the future. That is the kind of benefit that they will see in the world. So segmented polarity means that different countries are developing different specialisms, which means their growth won't be equal to others. And countries will come in together in associations and in partnerships with other countries where they're lacking so they can have a combined agenda fulfilled. And an example of this would be things like the G7, right, where we have countries who come together because they are financially astute and because they have a shared common identity or a philosophy of the world, which is why they come together. Another example of this is the BRICS. And for example, Saudi Arabia think of joining the BRICS because we have then another conglomeration of countries which come together because they have a common idea of what they want to see happen in the world, and they will use their resources in this forum to make sure this becomes a reality into the future. And this will happen in smaller versions with smaller countries coming together regionally, and also on the macro level for the more powerful countries doing this, which will change, I think, the world order in a significant way. And I don't think investors are really prepared for this.
Well, pretty interesting, I have to say, Klisman. And you mentioned like quite a few relevant macro trends, not only from the geopolitical point of view, but also these absolutely are integrated with the investment side. You mentioned about globalization. Actually, there is something that I'm realizing in-house that is deglobalization, actually. So it's a reduction, actually, on the circle where, for example, we are working. And definitely many other one. The technology side, of course, is one of them, but absolutely interested to read your paper, your report much more in details, because this can become like, as usual, the chat that we have all the time, quarterly, but more than that, to enrich our knowledge that, you know, it's very relevant, the educational side that we offer to our clientele. So now, actually, you mentioned about, we've been talking about quite few of the geopolitical issues. So you actually, the major one that you spoke, I catched from your intro, it's the one that we are living in Europe. That is the war in UK, no, that is affecting so many other different kind, not only the society, but asset classes. Now, the question in our last few minutes is, are there any specific region from your analysis that are much more resilient in terms of geopolitical risk in this specific, you know, financial year, let's say, or in this specific quarter? Because I mean, we're gonna hear from you in the next quarter a little bit more. So what is your view in that?
Well, if we see in terms of where the regions rank in our index, what we notice is that Europe ranks as the most powerful region in the world, because they have some very interesting fundamentals that, although we have something like an energy crisis in Europe, right? The ability for Europe to find alternative sources of energy, although hard, is not impossible. And they have other fundamentals which show their resilience to this. The least most powerful region in the world is Sub-Saharan Africa. But when we're looking, for example, at the most resilient regions in relation to geopolitical risk, I don't think any region is spared the impacts of geopolitical risk, because the world as we see today, Antonia, and as you can see it in your own investment world, is very interconnected. So wheat and fertilizer comes from Russia and from Ukraine, which feeds, you know, the economies of the Middle East and North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. And we have other commodities from different parts of the world which feed other parts of the world. So what we need to realize is that as countries grow and develop their power, the things that becomes the most important are the international forums where countries can come together to hash out their disputes. So things like the World Trade Organization, and that kind of forum is going to become even more important, because countries will grow and develop their influence, and they need a forum, they need a place where the international community can come together to discuss and to debate how the future of global affairs will develop. Because if that doesn't happen, then they'll take matters into their own hands and they'll develop different kinds of forums which do not have the consensus of the world together, which means we'll see a lot more unpredictable behavior from parts of the world which don't agree with the status quo right now. So instead of saying which countries are the most resilient or least resilient, every country is at risk, every region is at risk of unpredictable change if the leaderships of these countries decide to take matters into their own hands and act in accordance to their own interests and not with a consensus. So that becomes very worrying for me when I see it on the macro trend, because I am in this every single day of the week, 365 days a year. And you can see how countries become frustrated by having conversations with these countries in private settings, how frustrated they're becoming at the international order by the lack of communication that occurs. And they expect to see more unpredictability in the world because these institutions, which are meant to be forums, are not doing enough to bring people to the table together. So in private conversations with leaders and with the high commissions and with the embassies, especially in London, when I'm having conversations with these guys and girls, they're telling me privately that there is a growing sense of risk in different parts of the world, because I don't want to say there's a lack of trust, but there's a lack of communication with key players as things change so fast. And when things change so fast, people tend to focus on themselves first. We can see this during COVID. When COVID hit the world, the lack of communication, especially within regions like Europe, with what is the plan and policy, becomes frozen in time because people care about themselves. When shocks, financial shocks, when commodity shocks happen across the world, the lack of communication amongst financial capitals and political capitals becomes severe, and that lack of communication leads to people making decisions not based on the entire consensus of where are we going into the future, and there's splits in this. That's what I have to say about that.
Well, definitely, much more talkings, exchange of ideas at eye level. I'm definitely agree with you. There is much more need, and I think one of course, the summit that you engage, it's one of them. We should do much more. One of the things that doing conferences around the area that we cover, it's one of them, because exchange in talking, it's the way to improve. This is like, for me, a big value, and I definitely agree with you. So I'm on the other side. I would like to use like the last 30 seconds that we have. Do you have a specific concern that in terms of geopolitical risks that you are analyzing and then eventually could become, and now it's like under the surface, or it's there, but it's like hybrid, that could become the new black swan to look at?
I don't think you need to look at anything that isn't being seen before. I think what's happening now with the Russian conflict is something which worries me, only because there's no clear road as to how this ends. You know, there's no clear road as to how this ends. And forget about the investment side for a second, right? Forget about that, because when talks of nuclear weapons, and with the fact that Russia didn't renew its last remaining nuclear agreement with the nuclear powers, worries me, because they're taking an independent view, not based again on consensus on what we should do about these stockpiles. And when we have conversations now of other countries supplying weapons to Russia, this shows that Russia is becoming, I think, is in a position of stress and in a position of retaliation. So beyond the investment side, I think there's very little I think investors can do to solve or to contribute to this political crisis. But they are faced with the backlashes of this, right? So when we have talks again of Elon Musk and his Starlink program helping the Ukrainians and actually providing more military assistance to the United States with Starshield, which is again another project which maybe some of your audiences don't know. Starshield is a project that the U.S. government is participating with SpaceX with. We see the private sector now being involved much more so in this. And without a clear way negotiated settlement with this, I see this developing into something which nobody wants to see. And I don't think you need to look for any black swans or gray rhinos to see where the future will be with conflict, because we have something right in our faces which could be detrimental, not only to the investment world, but also to our relations in international relations, and also to the safety of the world.
Klisman, thank you very much for your time. We are definitely out of time. It was like, as usual, very juicy, very insightful from your side. Once again, I appreciate your time, and I looking forward actually immediately for the next quarter to see how the things are going to evolve. I will make sure that our audience will receive your report. And thank you once again for your time.
Thank you, Antonia.